So we are now at statement 4 of the second chapter. People claim that it is only the mind that transmigrates in samsara, that it is only the mind that wander around in samsara. So, of course, this is generally true. What continues, so to say, from lifetime to lifetime, from the general view, general perspective, of course, we say it's the mind part of the body-mind combination, right? Buddha says, what's here? What's here is body and mind. Body and mind. So of body and mind, which aspect, right, of this body and mind combination continues to the next life? The mind part, not the body part. So that first we have to understand that. We have to appreciate that point. So then say, okay, good. Because in the Buddhist context, right, rebirth, multiple lifetimes, infinite multiple lifetimes, is made slightly more complicated when there isn't a soul, an unchanging thing that goes from life to life. So even mind, we say, is not an unchanging thing that goes in and out of bodies from lifetime to lifetime. That's the Hindu view. It's almost like, if you imagine the soul floating around, that is unchanging, eternal, but it changes clothes. I think that's a common expression, like someone changing clothes. So the body is like the clothing. So if this set of clothing is now old and tethered and cannot be repaired and cannot be washed anymore, then you throw away this and then you put on the next set of clothes. That's a way of thinking about multiple lifetimes, but with an unchanging kind of core, with a soul or a self that goes. The Buddhist view is the closest analogy that I can think of is like a river. So the individual, there is the individual, and the individual is like a river. And so this river keeps flowing. At no point is this river static, unchanging. At any point in the river, the banks are changing, the water is changing, but there is continuity so that we can say, this is the Mississippi River, this is the Ganga River, this is, the Amazon River. So there's enough continuity. So generally, the Buddhist view is that the mental part is what continues on to the next life, flows on to the next life. So as a result of that, then we will say, it's the mind. So often we will say, it's your mind that is suffering. It's your mind that is experiencing happiness. Again, all of this is indeed what the way the Buddha will explain. So in a way, this Vajra statement it's like an interesting turn of events, so to say, an interesting twist to this problem of mind-body combination, the mind-body coming together. And the implications of this Vajra statement is that, so anyway, this Vajra statement says, It is the body that wanders in samsara. It's the body that wanders in samsara. And again, legitimately, I can say, you can say, no, this is wrong. This is not what the Buddha taught. Buddha said again and again, it's the mind. True. But this Vajra statement, again, is pointing to something interesting, I think. I personally have some experience of not just concepts, but some direct, personal experience of what this statement is illuminating, what this statement is getting us to think a little about. So Chodra quotes Pamudrupa. Listening today to his reading of the Ratnamega Sutra, I understood the teaching, quote, the ocean of samsara is this body, unquote. By thinking about that, I understood that, or by reflecting on that. So thinking is a little too, I think, when we talk about thinking and analyzing and scrutinizing and dividing and judging, and that's not what it's meant here. Here, those activities, right? Analyzing, thinking, laying it all out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah? They certainly have a role to play when we are studying the Dharma. But the next step has to happen, which is what I feel here he is really talking about, which is a more intuitive reflection. Not in a linear way of thinking, but in a more holistic, intuitive, to intuit, to kind of have a felt sense of like, what does this mean? Rather than abstracting it into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Not thinking it that way. So he says, by understanding that, by reflecting on that, I understood that as the great outer ocean is the basis for many beings, this great outer ocean is a reference to kind of ancient cosmology. They think that we're surrounded by ocean. It's the basis for many beings. This body is the basis and root of samsara. Conceptions of various good and bad intentions arise due to the coming together of habitual traces and conditions consisting of outer objects. Since the body exists, filled with all the seeds of beginningless habitual traces. So here it says, our concepts of good and bad intentions, meaning, all our intentions, virtuous ones, non-virtuous ones, skillful ones, not skillful ones, they arise due to the coming together of habitual traces, meaning karmic habits from many, many lifetimes, and outer conditions together. Because of those two coming together, then we are sometimes more disposed towards producing skillful actions of body, speech, and mind. In this case, skillful attitudes, and unskillful, maybe meaning non-virtuous intentions. Through the accumulated karma, one establishes a body in keeping with that karma, and thereby the body wanders in samsara. So here, it's saying, this quote is Pamodrupa saying, when he was listening to maybe Gampopa reading the Ratnamega, Jewel Cloud Sutra, he understood. So probably in the Ratnamega Sutra, there is an expression. The ocean of samsara is this body. And so then, reflecting on that, Pamodrupa understood that actually the body is, that you can say, the basis of this wandering. This body is the basis of this wandering. Not the mind. So the Bodhicattva says, since the mind does not possess a body, no one whatsoever can destroy it. Due to its attachment to the body which is suffering harms it. So here the first point they want to make, Chodrat wants to make in this commentary is, the mind as in the natural state of the mind is always quiescent, meaning at rest. It's always free from birth and death. The mind, the nature of mind is always free from birth and death. And so the mind cannot be that which is wandering. The body is the one that wanders. However, that which wanders in the 3 realms and 6 families, meaning 6 realms of rebirth, is the body. And after attaining the result, complete awakening, the nirmanakaya that benefits beings is also a body. So here is making the interesting connection. It says, right now, because we are not yet Buddha, so then this body, is where happiness and suffering takes place. Then after Buddhahood is achieved, meaning all confusion is dispelled from the mind, yes, not from the body, then this body transforms into nirmanakaya, which exists for the benefit of beings. Right now, this body exists as the basis of suffering for self and suffering for others. When Buddhahood is achieved, then this body transforms into nirmanakaya. And so it is also a nirmanakaya. It's also a body, as in a physical body that benefits beings. Therefore, whatever good or bad karma matures must depend on a body. As it is said, the karma of the body possesses is not wasted in 100 eons. So a quote from Chandakirti and several other places in the collection of the Buddha's teachings, you can find this. And only those who possess bodies have karma. If you ask yourself whether the intermediate state is without bodies, the answer is that there definitely exists a body of habitual traces. A body of habitual traces in the intermediate state. That is also a body. Both the Abhidharmakosha and Lord Pamodrupa state, in the intermediate state, the bodily form of the previous existence has all the senses and moves unhindered. Yes, in the Abhidharmakosha it says this. Furthermore, the Yukti Shastika says, if the skandhas do not cease, one cannot pass into nirvana, even if the afflictions are exhausted. When the skandha cease, one will be liberated. So as long as there is body, yeah, skandha here means the afflicted aspects. As long as there is body, then samsara continues. But when Buddhahood is achieved, it's not that bodies disappear, but now it's a different kind of body. It's the nirmana body, the nirmana kaya. Now, one question that I could raise and then I will try to answer is that for those of you who know these things, so now, yes, you can say, okay, well, in the sensory realm, among the three realms, the realm of the senses, yes, the body is the basis of suffering. But what about the form realm, higher than our sensory realm, and the formless realm? These are the three realms. So you could raise that question. I think the form realm part is easy to answer, as in those forms in the form realm, they might not be the coarse bodies, the coarse solid bodies we're talking about here, but they are still bodies. Then what about the formless realm? By definition, without form. That means without bodies. That I don't have an answer. I'm surprised that they have not raised it, hypothetically as a challenger asking. I could venture to answer that by saying, again, that even in the formless realm, there is still some kind of involvement with even the most subtle forms. But again, here, I think if we take these statements as first and foremost key points for training ourselves, then we don't need to bother so much with making all the different parts of the teachings all, agree together. It's not like we need to defend the Buddha Dharma against, attackers, pointing out the loopholes, which at one point in India, in the Nalanda University, they had to do that because there were people poking holes, or finding all the different holes and say, what about this? What about this? What about this? Right? So they were very busy answering all those questions. What about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? And that, that kind of like impulse, no, not impulse seems even more natural, but that kind of mindset of what about this? 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 Is due to historical chance, right? That Buddhism existed among a very vibrant intellectual tradition in India, where people of different philosophies, different faiths, different spirituality are constantly debating each other. That's their national sport, not football, not soccer, but to watch, religious and philosophers, religious people and philosophers debate. That was India's natural spot. Imagine that, So that was the environment that Indian Buddhists lived in. So they had to come up with, well, with this, it's this. Well, with that is that, right? Now, not only were the Buddhist team playing against non-Buddhist teams, then within the Buddhist family, there are also different teams that have to play against each other, so to say. Well, if you say that, what about that? If you say that, what about that? If you say that, what about that? So a lot of that energy went into answering, what about that? 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 By necessity, they did that. But if we get carried away and think, that is the primary way of engaging the Dharma, then I think we have been sidetracked. How do we know that? I say, for me, go back to example of the historical Buddha. You see that he will answer questions that he gauged to be real, what I call existential questions. Questions that are indeed coming from a place of suffering. He will answer those questions. Sometimes he will help the questioner reframe the question. He would engage. But he would not engage when it was what we would call a philosophical debate. But you said that, and you said that, and you said that. Then he is like, no, I in a way you could say the Buddha say, I have more important things, I have better things to do. There's no point arguing with you like that. But if the person is anguished, suffering, and out of that suffering is actually, trying to heal the suffering by saying, but you say this, and then now you say that, then the Buddha actually answers. And when necessary, when skillful, he uses reasoning. So I think we should remember this, right? Yeah. So here anyway, let's look at the notes. Yeah. According to the Dorshema, people argue that the mind is the cause that makes suffering arise, and all the ripening of the results of karma ripen in the mind alone. Therefore, any suffering one experiences is only an experience of the mind. Since mind, quote, is consciousness associated with the body, unquote, it is the mind alone that wanders in samsara. The body that is left behind in this world is just a corpse, merely dead matter. Therefore, it cannot be the thing that wanders. Commenting on Pamadrupa's teaching, Dorshema explains that since the body is filled with the seeds of the beginningless habitual traces, when those traces come into contact with the condition of external objects, the conceptions of the various good and bad thoughts arise. Although this is not explicitly mentioned, at this point we must assume that, based on these conceptions, the person engages in actions and creates karma, which manifests as a future body. Dorje Sherab continues to explain that the future bodies produced there are actualized in accordance with those traces. Quote, samsara continues as the nature of those bodies, and the habitual traces of the various activities continue to exist along with those bodies. Since those habitual traces have been awakened by objective conditions, future bodies are produced, and the wheel of those bodies revolves. In other words, yes, of course, it's all these habitual traces and everything are created by the mind, but when they ripen, they don't ripen alone with the mind. They always ripen in conjunction with bodies. And they always ripen as bodies. So in that sense, it's the bodies. It's the bodies, I think. Well, Tibetan, there's not always, plural is not always indicated. There is a way to say many, but not always indicated. So I think we can translate to, like, in samsara, it's bodies that wander. Such a body also arises in the intermediate state right after one dies, and it is called the body of habitual traces. In the Dorshema and opponents, oh, this is answered, sorry. Since the consciousness of the four formless states, of the dream state, of the intermediate state, and of the intermediate state of becoming does not take on a body, how does the body transmigrate for those who are without actual bodies? The reply is that although the body is not established as a visible form in the four formless states, there exists in those bodies a body whose form is invisible, accomplished by samadhi. Yeah, so that's the answer that I speculated. That even in the formless realm, there are samadhi, meaning meditation bodies that are not visible to either the human eye or the divine eye. Divine eye is a more refined eyes. Even they cannot see, and therefore it's called formless realm. But it's not completely formless. Here it's because it has a body produced by, accomplished by meditative concentration. This body still accords with the habitual traces, meaning the habitual traces. So when you're born in the formless realm, there is no overt mental karma going on, but the habitual traces of all your previous lifetimes continue to exist. Therefore, it's still samsara. Therefore, the formless realms is not beyond samsara. So they still exist as habitual traces. The seeds of habitual traces continue to exist in that body. Therefore, it is the body of habitual traces that wanders. In the intermediate state of becoming, too, there is an intermediate state body on the basis of the consciousness of the being. And the seeds of the habitual traces again continue to exist in that body. Thereby, the seeds of habitual traces transmigrate along with that body. It is only when the skandhas completely cease that one becomes free from bodily existence. Now your questions or comments, your reflections, your intuitive reflection, your intuitive understanding awareness. Intuit. Don't dissect.
What I think of is like being tangled.
Sorry, say that again?
What I think of is like being tangled.
Uh-huh.
In samsara, we have these confusions when we're all tangled up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the tangling here is the bodies.
Yes, because when you're tangled, it's going to be, a mass.
Mm-hmm.
In samsara, you're always going to be, like, you're not tangled in different spots. There's always this one unified thing, which is all of the mess together.
Mm-hmm.
So long as you're in samsara, you're always that.
Tangled, yeah.
And then I think, tangled is like this, like visually, it's kind of like a body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so here, Kyopa is not dismissing that mind is involved. But he wants to emphasize that the mind is always free. So the good news, so to say, here is that the mind is always free. The good news is that the mind is always free. And therefore, no matter how tangled you are, if you remember the mind is always free, some measure of freedom can arise. So that's the good news, I feel. The bad news is, as long as there is body, But you cannot say, I want to get rid of this body. You cannot, because the bodies will continue as long as confusion continues. So don't misunderstand. This is not an anti-body view. In fact, the flip side of this is, so since it is the bodies that wander, therefore what? Let me pose this question. Therefore, for us, again, don't think in the abstract. For us, intuitively, if the bodies is what wanders in samsara, therefore what? What are some implications?
We have to use body to get out of it.
Yes, we have to use body to get out of it. That's one implication. So let's take that further. Therefore,
it's the mind that leads us out of it.
Yeah, the mind is always, yes, of course. Therefore, come back to the body.
We have some control.
You have something to say?
Mind in nature is not in samsara.
Yes, Okay, go back to the body.
Okay.
Judy, you have something to add?
We have control to a degree over how we use our body and the activities of our body. So we can use our body in conjunction with mind to perform.
Okay, therefore, link it to, the neighborhood that we have been hanging out. Like just this morning.
Therefore, the mind suffers.
No.
No.
Steer away from the mind. We have too focused on the mind. Therefore, the body in the neighborhood that we've been hanging out this morning. What did you hear during Guru Puja?
We're actually guru.
No.
Or we're deity. We're deity.
Yes. And the base empowerment.
Our actions and mind manifest in bodies and become Buddhas. If our behavior and our mind is correct,
yes,
we are actually manifestations of the Buddha. When we act in a Buddha-like way,
yes,
our bodies are manifestations of Buddha. They appear as Buddha.
Yeah. And so hence, the importance of getting the understanding related to the vase empowerment, that this body is the mandala of Buddhas. So that is the method that will get us out of this tangled experience, this entanglement.
To extend that analogy, would you say that it would be, it would fit to think that then like grasping to that tangledness at you is where is the basis of samsara. And if you don't grasp it as you, then that's just the mind.
Yeah. Or I don't know if I would go as far as to saying that the grasping itself, but the grasping definitely makes it worse. Yeah.
Okay.
The grasping definitely makes it worse. So to me, right, we have to pay attention to body, but not in the, obsessive way, like all the obsessions over the body that the, advertisement and selling stuff industry is thriving on. There's a underlying logic as to why it's thriving, because it appeals to a certain, right, deep insight that is the body, right? Just as I like to say, you know, even people who do the most terrible things, in fact, ironically, and maybe shockingly, it's because of Buddha nature. You remember that kind of reasoning? Yeah. Hitler, because of Buddha nature. Mother Teresa, because of Buddha nature. As in innate wanting to be happy. But the problem is how you go about, right? So innately, it's like we recognize it's the body. But then when you grasp, and then when you don't have the right understanding and method, right, then, you know, you emphasize the body the way that a lot of, you know, I mean, just look across like a lot of like spiritual, quote unquote, spiritual and related, you know, there's a lot of focus and obsession on body. And depending on where you live, you know, if you live in Asheville and if you live in West Asheville, you know, oh my God, you know, like all sorts of body disciplines and body, you know, manipulation and body this, body that, body this, body that, you know. So something is going on there. Let's put it that way, right? Now, then sometimes we make the mistake of thinking spirituality, the word itself, spirituality, right, sets it up as not body. So that word is not very good. In fact, there's no word like that in the traditional Buddhist languages. There's no term like that, spirituality. So then we link this back to the Buddha's teachings on mindfulness of body. Again, the early Western discoverers of Buddhism occurred, at least in the English world, unfortunately, in the Victorian period. So certain views of the body of the Victorian period guided the way that these Victorian prudes read the Buddhist texts, you know. And so they read it in a certain way that really kind of presented like Buddhism, and then later early Buddhism, and later like Pali-based Buddhism especially, as very like anti-body. But now, you know, if you look at contemporary Theravada living traditions, you know, oh, they have a lot of body practices, including, you know, like in Southeast Asia, body practice of tattoo. not like tattoo, you know, random things, but these like basically what we would call mandalas, protective devices, is tattoos on the body. That's a form of body practice, you know. And there are many, you know, body practices in Theravada even. So, which is my way of saying, you know, like even in the tradition that, especially in the West, is thought of as, you know, very Protestant. And Protestant, by the way, culture is very distant from body. Except for Protestant black churches, you know, I think it's very body-based. But a lot of like high, you know, mainstream Protestant, it's very heady. And bodies are best not noticed. So all those are our baggage, you know, that we have to be aware of.
You've talked before about how different traditions might approach first with the body or first with the mind, using the mind to influence the body, using the body to influence the mind. Mm-hmm. Is there a sense in which everything to be done is in like the body? Like, are there any obscurations? Like, I know there's the ideas of like the channels in the body.
Yeah.
Are there any obscurations that are not in the body?
No.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the body that wanders.
Yeah.
It's the bodies that tangles. So again, it tells us something about why Kyoba Rinpoche base empowerment, why Buddha taught, meditation on the body. Why Buddha said, in this fathom tall body, 6 feet. Fathom is an ancient, archaic measurement unit, 6 feet. In this fathom tall body is both samsara and nirvana. Very explicit, he says, this kaya, this body. So in a more experiential, intuitive way, I can share with you. Where we are, meaning we're not Buddhists yet. The body has such a powerful hold on the mind. And we should pay attention to that, healthy attention to that. Of course, body and mind are always, in the bigger picture, back and forth influencing each other. Yeah, even in this statement, Kyoba Rinpoche is not saying, without the mind, body can do things by itself. No, of course not. But the body-mind relationship is completely sort of, for all intents and purposes, you could say, yeah. At least when it comes to the afflicted mind is also always afflicted with the bodies. Nature of mind is free from afflictions and therefore free from the tanglement. But insofar as this mind that we need to work with, then the body is really an important place to pay attention to.
Dr. Lai?
Yes.
Does the material today imply that that karma only manifests in mind-body combinations?
Yes, it does.
Could be a future body, but it's going to be a mind-body combination where the karma lands.
Yes. Correct. So often, right? We get it, like a few years back when some of my health issues were kind of coming up to the surface. Like you get it, like, oh, stress, right? Or mental tightness, causes the body to manifest illness. And the illness kind of controls your mind. As much as you get it, you have no power to overcome it. No power to overcome it. You're at the mercy of the body. And as much of being inspired by Milarepa and this and that, right? The body's hold is so powerful. Now, of course, the body's hold is a intuitive way of experiencing it, because you know that it's actually the afflicted minds being stuck with the body that allows the body's hold on me to be so strong. So then the body is in charge, So during those times, I learned that not that you're giving up at all on what the Dharma says, but you go at it from the direction of taking care of the body, and that gives you a break. Because when the body is not waging war at you, then the mind can have a chance to kind of have the upper hand. Then things begin to shift, begins to change. Yeah, so it's a dynamic, it's a very dynamic relationship. Almost thinking like, so there is body, right? Afflicted bodies, which is what we're talking about. Afflicted mind, right? Then there's Buddha mind and Buddha bodies. And all four, so to say, not objectively four, don't think of it as four, but all four as an experience are always sort of in the mix. Maybe as a plug, for this coming weekend's retreat, that's where we're going to explore a little bit more this whole topic. In samsara, is the body that wanders. It's bodies that wander. But when the mind is really refined, then of course, the tanglement, as you put it, that is when you can say, you don't grasp at it, then it has less of a power over it. But it's still there, but it's experienced differently.
And maybe with more slack, it starts to untangle.
Sorry?
Maybe with like more slack in the system, starts to untangle easier. Yeah,
possibly. But sometimes yes, sometimes no, So I said, like, among Buddhist teachers, and in fact, you will see, some of them don't have very good health at all. And objectively, if you look and you say, why? Objectively, without all of, without this understanding necessarily, if you look at it like from a nutrition point of view and all that, right? Then you can say, well, that's because, they live very, unbalanced diets. I mean, you all know that, you know what I like to eat. Then when I come, you want me to be happy. And every day, everybody wants me to be happy. And I have no self-control. Then, of course, the diet, is all messed up, That's one kind of getting messed up. Another kind of getting messed up is that some of these teachers really don't have time to care about to eat this and not to eat that. Then the body will do what the body does. It doesn't really care. But some of these very unique, I would say, or very advanced, not unique like they fell out of the sky, but they refined their minds so that it doesn't matter. So I always, in my mind, the example of Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, although I never met him, never seen him in person, you can see in pictures and stories that people tell, to start with, for a Tibetan, he's very unusual. He's like a giant as a Tibetan. You look at when he was young, he's like 6 foot something, like a Yao Ming of Tibetans. He's such a big build, Then later on in life, by the time he got very famous, for the most part, even to walk from one place to another, he needed two people to support him, to walk, to move, right? Now, from that perspective, it's a lot of suffering. But then from the people who live with him, who are around him all the time, they said, yes, there is a physical limitation that Rinpoche experienced later in his life, but there wasn't a hint of suffering at all in him. Now that is, to me, not yet enough good reason to say, therefore, no need to take care of your body. I don't mean that. What I'm saying here is like, it's dangerous to just idealize that, and say, therefore, directly or indirectly, I'm thinking, oh, as long as I practice the Dharma, it'll be fine, No, it's not fine, because I cannot handle the suffering when it arises. And he can. He could, obviously. I mean, all the witnesses around him say, no, all these challenges, it never bothered him at all. Not only that, right, because people also very clearly said, like, almost like, 20 out of his 24 hours, he is seeing people. There's an endless stream of people coming to him, asking for transmissions, asking for teachings, asking for explanations, asking for empowerments, and like 20 hours a day, continuously he sees people without stop. That is a nirmanakaya, benefiting beings. So of course he has no time to go for walks. When I don't have time to go for walks, it's not because I'm seeing people. I'm watching Netflix. Yeah, or after a meal, I have no time to walk because I'm lazy, not because I'm giving transmissions, So in my case, it would be I'm destroying the mandala of this body and I'm destroying the deities if I don't take care of this. In Dugo Khyentse Rinpoche's case, he is benefiting beings. Yeah, not out of laziness. Now, it's very humbling and instructive, right? His Holiness the Dalai Lama, he takes effort to care for his body. These pictures, I'm sure you have seen, he has a stairmaster, in his private room. And his daily schedule, he walks, He can't go out and walk, he'll be swarmed by everybody. So it's terrible, like, in his life, he cannot just go out and walk around in Dharamsala. I don't think he's ever walked around in Dharamsala, not possible, So he has a stairmaster that he walks and he keeps his body. So even someone like His Holiness Dalai Lama, has to take care of the body, because, in other words, don't get cocky, don't overestimate and think, oh, I'm fine, No, you have to take care of your body. In that context, I think I've had this conversation with my friends in Malaysia. We see a range of like Buddhist teachers from various traditions because of where we are in Southeast Asia. You can say, overall, as a general statement, not the new generation, but the older generation, because the new generation, things have changed, unfortunately. If you compare an older generation of like practitioners and teachers, overall, you can say those in the Chinese tradition tends to be healthier. Compared to those in the Southeast Asian tradition, Thailand, yeah, Burma, Sri Lanka, and then, in the Himalayan, Tibetan. The Chinese teachers, they are like physically, right? They are very light, the old generation. They move about like they are, immortals, floating on clouds. They're very light, and there's a glow to their complexion and everything. So it's a combination of diet. They are mostly vegan, right? And labor, manual labor, because in the Chinese tradition it says monks should work. So you don't have like lay people around serving. So monks do manual labor, even farming, which in Indian Buddhism and Tibetan Buddhism is a no-no. You cannot farm. Because in the Vinaya, it says you cannot farm. But in China, that has changed. They grow their own food. They're self-sufficient. So there are these factors, And another factor in the Chinese context, or East Asia in general, so Korea, perhaps, is also the Taoist side that emphasizes cultivating the body. Watching diet, doing exercise like Tai Chi, Qigong. So a lot of these old Chinese masters, men and women, they have incorporated these body disciplines. So they're very supple. Their bodies are very light, and they're very flexible. Whereas like you can see, like in the Theravada cultures, right? Their rules don't allow them to engage in a lot of manual labor. So then they get served at lunchtime and they eat one meal a day, or breakfast and before noon, or before the sun goes like more than 4 inches shadow or something like that. So then it's a big meal at lunch, and these are offered, and when lay people have money, then the monks become less healthy, because wealthy lay people want to give the best, right? And so over nutrition, and you eat, and then after that, what do? You take a nap, because there's no manual labor to do, except for forest monks. That's where I think they still maintain a balance, because for forest monks, you have to walk, miles into town before dawn to get food. And then you walk a few miles back. Then there's a lot of sweeping of the forest ground. Even though they cannot dig and farm, they emphasis on sweep. So there's that. There's kind of to balance things out. So these are some of the body related. So anyway, this is this very special Vajra statement. So we continue on Wednesday, and then Friday as well. Then Friday evening is the start of that retreat. Then next weekend, I want to say something about that. Then following weekend, it's actually starting on Thursday night, the first session, then Friday all day, Saturday all day. The publicity that has gone out says, if you can participate at least 80%, then register. I can say to this group that it's fine. You can still register the Zoom. Even if you say, oh, I can only do 60% or 70%, it's okay. Because we don't expect that many people as originally we imagine it might be. So it's not going to exceed 500 people registering. So it's better that you register, because then I think then you're a little bit more committed. Then do as much of the 2 days as you can. Just go ahead and register. So Urban Dharma has a link, or Tibet House in Guatemala has a way of registering as well. So go ahead and register and then participate. This particular retreat, the practice text is very straightforward, very simple, very short sadhanas, with a number of aspiration prayers. So go ahead and register. Nathan, you provide the link in the Zoom chat if you can, and then people can register. So encourage others to register too, because we don't expect that many people, and it's good to have people on Zoom. And also know like detailed setup of shrine. You can set up the shrine. Of course, you set up a nice shrine if you want. That's good. And so it's the 3 kayas. So it's Amitabha, Avalokiteshvara, and Guru Rinpoche. So any combination of these 3 is a very nice shrine for this practice. So that's it for today. Changchu Samcho Rinpoche Magye Banam Ge Gyurche Ge Banyam Pa Me Pa Yang Gong Ne Gong Du Bel Wer Shou.
Thank you very much.
Ta-ta.
Thank you, teacher.